Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We're here to recap Week 8 around the SEC, a busy weekend, as it were, not just because we had the usual number of conference games, but also because weather moved things around. So you had to kind of keep your head on a swivel. Saturday was a particularly busy day around the league. We will get into everything that happened. And we're going to start with A&M and Tennessee. That is going to be first thing on the docket. But before we get to any of that, I have to let you know that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get ready for a new season of fishing fun with Academy Sports and Outdoors and reel in the best gear at low prices every day. Plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store or curbside pickup on academy.com orders. Okay, Mark, let's just be blunt about it. What the hell happened in Knoxville on Saturday?
I don't know, man. I mean, after Friday night's game, Tennessee no hits A&M and run rules them. Okay, that's about as low as you can go, right? A 7-inning, 10-0 run rule no hit performance. I mean, I was wondering if Michael Early was going to be if he was going to get Lane Kiffined on the tarmac. I mean, with the way that went, it was just so bad. And then A&M comes out and they look like on Saturday, they look like the team we all expected them to be. And certainly offensively. And I mean, they hit 7 home runs in a game and 11 on the day, was something like that. Just absolutely torpedoed a Tennessee pitching staff that had their way with everyone. Okay. So even the games they lost, they pitched well. And I feel like, with what A&M was able to do, and I alluded to this in the dish, was this an awakening of this really talented team that just needed something good to happen, all right? Or is this a one-day aberration and they go back to being who they've been for the majority of the season? And obviously time will tell, but it does kind of make you give you pause to bury the Aggies, right? Because I buried them Friday night. I mean, I really thought that was it. And with the way they came out and showed the fight and showed just tenacity and just pummeled what I thought was the best team in the country, I feel like you've got to do some recalculation on the Aggies because if they can do this on the road in Knoxville, they can do this to anybody. And if they can, then the hole is big, but it's not so big that they can just get on a run. And at this point, if they even make the postseason, you see the upside. They would be the scariest, say they make it at 12-18, right? As a 3 seed at 12-18, I want them nowhere near my regional if I'm a host. But at this point, there's even upside for them to get to 13, 14 wins if things fall right. Again, you got to play really well and let's not make too much out of one day. But it does give you hope. If you're located in the greater College Station area, that this thing maybe it's not over yet. Unlike where, and we can get to this later in Gainesville, where it looks like it might be over down there.
Yeah, and interestingly, I was going to make the comparison of maybe A&M is what last year's Florida was, which is, they ride the hot hand basically all the way to Omaha and have some weird record like 36-30 at the end of the year, even though they ended up in the College World Series. Yeah. So that feels like it could be on the table. Also, they very well could be an interesting test case for what the committee decides to do with SEC teams that have league records worse than what we're used to getting into the postseason. Mm-hmm. Where I can definitely see that being the case, where it's like, what do you do with a team that's clearly among the handful of the most talented teams in the country that, went, as you said, maybe 12-18 in the league. Mm-hmm. What do you do with that? And I'm kind of glad I don't have to make that choice, honestly.
Yeah. Well, a mitigating factor will be if Caden Sorrell continues to do what he did this weekend, and he missed, the majority of all those losses. So that's certainly something they can use as a data point to help skew that decision, and that would be in the Aggies' favor. But yeah, it's I don't want to make too much. It was just one day, but it was an extremely impressive day.
Yeah, last thing I'll say on it is that from a Tennessee standpoint, I'm not worried really in the slightest, to be honest. Every team is entitled to certainly a bad day. Every team's really entitled to a bad weekend. And every great team looks totally unbeatable until they get beaten. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, well, and then rightfully, we're all very quick to be like, well, that's baseball. But before that, we just can't even fathom them losing, right? So like, that's just kind of the way the game works. But
and everybody's going to have those weekends. I mean, Georgia just had one. I mean, everybody can look incredible one week, and then just whatever it is, matchups, factors. Maybe you're feeling a little bit too good about yourself, and you get a little bit of a wake up call. Those are not necessarily terrible, right? And you want those to happen in March and April instead of May and June. And I think if you're Tennessee, you don't want to lose and you don't want to give up 1,000 runs, but it's to a very talented team, and it happened, week 4 of SEC play.
Let's move on to Arkansas, Auburn, and Alabama. Mark, you were on hand at Plainsman Park for that, including one of human history's longest doubleheader days. I'll just leave it open to you, open-ended. What stood out to you about your weekend in Auburn?
Well, first, the renovated Plainsman Park was definitely lived up to billing. They did a great job with it. It's transformed. It's sort of landlocked, so there's not a ton of space that you could do, but they were able to really expand it. And then what they did out at what they call the War Eagle Wall, the green monster and left, they've got seats up there now. And I walked up there. That's really the first thing I did. I didn't even put my book bag, my backpack down. I went straight and checked it out, climbed the wall, and it's a lot high. It's high, but then you get up there and you look down. It's like, oh, this takes a little bit of time to understand just how high it is. And I do feel like there's a different buzz around the program, around the ballpark. They've got more premium areas for donors. They've got more money coming in. Certainly in this NIL era, that's important. And I feel like it's a program that's definitely ascending. On the field, they were really close to having an incredible weekend. Justin LeBron thought otherwise, with his 9th inning home run to lift Alabama in game 2. But otherwise, Auburn controlled that series. Friday night, Samuel Dutton was absolutely superb. 10-0. Auburn wins, run rule, and he threw a shutout and really baffled Alabama. And he's one of these guys, he was at LSU last year and was kind of a bit piece, wasn't a key cog for them. And now he's transformed into, honestly, one of the better pitchers in the conference. He doesn't overpower you with stuff, but he fills the zone with 4 or 5 pitches, and it's just he's got this really slow curveball. It's like low 70s, and it's basically like a changeup that moves, and he's throwing it for a strike. So you think I'll just take it. Well, there's strike 1, and I feel like if he can continue to do that, it really sets them up, because they are kind of struggling a little bit. There's some shuffling, I'll call it, behind him. And what do you get out of Cade Fisher? Nobody hits him, but he puts a lot of men on, and he doesn't get that deep in games, and it's uncomfortable. I do think that them being able to piece it together after that, they were really good in the bullpen, really all weekend, and I felt like they really looked like a good team. That's their 3rd series win. They had the hiccup at Georgia. We talked about teams are going to have those kind of weekends where they got swept. But otherwise, we'd be talking about them, near the top of the standings like we are some of these other teams. As far as Alabama, they got nothing out of their starters. I mean, Riley Quick was pretty good in game 2, but even his pitch count got up so high, he wasn't able to get as deep as he would have liked. But yeah, Zane Adams didn't have it on Friday, and Bobby Alcock didn't have it in game 3. And that really put them in a hole to start with that they were not able to overcome. One of the bigger things, a good, one of the lasting impressions for me is just watching Justin LeBron. Obviously, you see him a lot on TV, but seeing him in person, just how he moves, how graceful he is, and how he's always seemingly in the right place. Those are, it's hard to catch that kind of stuff watching a video stream. The other, an example of that, he made a great deke play on a Auburn hit a ball over the right fielder's head. Bryce Fowler for Alabama catches it, throws a BB towards second base. The runner's coming into second, and LeBron is just standing there like he's just watching the game, just like you or I, Joe. And then the ball's right there, and he snaps the tag on him for the out. Just things like that. He's just, he made a barehanded play on a ball up the middle to save a run. Just an incredible player. Plus, obviously, what he did at the plate with the 9th inning 2-run homer to take them from losing to winning. If he's not the best player in college baseball, he's in the discussion. And boy, did he have his moments that really kind of made the weekend from an Alabama standpoint. But for them, they just got to get more out of their starting staff. And if they do, they'll be fine. I think that's really what they've got to figure out.
Yeah, it's such a good point about Alabama, because I went into the weekend on the Friday show of Weekend Waypoint saying, if Alabama wins this series this weekend, I think we need to talk about them a little bit differently, because they came in the weekend, what was it, 7-2, something like that in the league. And if they win that, they're 9-3 at worst. And it's like, okay, that's right up there with, name your elite team in the SEC. And of course they didn't, but it just goes to show, like, man, the difference in, like, us talking about a team of, like, is Alabama a national title contender? Like, had they won the series, maybe we'd be having that discussion. And now it's like, this weekend showed their obvious vulnerabilities, which we've always kind of known. It's not like this is a surprise that, hey, their pitching is like a little bit shaky at times. That's not a surprise, but they kind of just kept figuring out a way to mitigate it. And but this does show that is where they're vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, one thing about them is they have that transcendent talent, right? With LeBron, and honestly, Cade Snell has been really good. Richie Bonamalo he had a great weekend. Just they moved him from the 9 spot to the leadoff spot, and he's really stays on base, right, ahead of LeBron and Snell, which is pretty good formula. And if Riley Quick is able, he missed a week with the blood blister. When I was talking to Rob Vaughn after that game, he said he was ready to go, but it's the Alabama Auburn game. You were not going to keep him off the field, and he wasn't quite where he's going to be. And the thought is, if he can continue to do that, because he struggled with command, if he can get back right, he gives them that big arm that not everyone has, right? And he can match up with anyone. And they just need more from Zane Adams. He just had a rough day. We all have them, and he didn't have it Friday night, but he's been good pretty much every other start. So if they have those two at the top of the rotation, then you're just trying to figure out what to do behind them. And I feel like they may have enough pieces. So, but when you have those kind of elite talent, I think that allows you to match up with some of these, better teams in the country that they're going to face week in, week out.
On Auburn, real quick, before we move on, it's just, we were talked about it offline quite a bit, but the freshmen doing what they're doing in the lineup, really impressive stuff, to the point where, this team this Auburn team has a high ceiling and could make a deep postseason run, but like, go ahead and sign me up for Auburn 2026 deep postseason run, right? With the freshman position players. Obviously they'll lose Ike Irish, and that's going to be a big loss, but these freshmen are so good, including one at the catcher position. And while maybe we haven't seen it as much as we would have hoped on the mound, it's certainly not a talent thing on the mound with their freshman pitchers. So as excited as I am to see what they can do this year, like, I'm kind of already itching to see 2026 version of them, because I think that has a chance to be pretty special.
Yeah, I agree totally. Bub Terrell is a guy for me that coming into the season, the thought was just enormous talent, but it might take a little bit of time. I thought if he played every day, he would be a guy to hit double-figure home runs, but probably have a really low average and a lot of Ks. And instead, I mean, he's on the accelerated plan. Okay, so he's going to get those double-digit home runs most likely, but he's also going to hit for. I mean, he may hit 330, 340. I mean, he's a really advanced hitter for a freshman, and he's just one of three. Two others that they have. Chris Rembert had an absolute monster home run in game 2 that kind of got overshadowed by LeBron's late inning, and then on Friday, Chase Fralick was the guy. I think he had 4 hits and called the game, the complete game shutout behind the plate. He and Dutton call their own pitches, which is rare, certainly for college players, and a freshman on top of that. So, I mean, just Auburn's in a great place when you look at their young talent, and they got. I mean, they've got pieces that, like we talked about with Alabama, with players who can match up with these better teams. It's just a question of with young players, you're going to get some ups and downs, and where do they, when do those ups come against who, and are you able to win those games when you have those downs?
Yeah, it's that's SEC baseball in a nutshell. Really, we just encapsulate, say that every week, and then finish the pod early. Speaking of teams that are in a good place, the Texas Longhorns up to number 2 in the country after sweeping Georgia at home. That is now their second marquee series win. Texas also got one against LSU at home. That resume is right up there with anybody in the country right now. We have them 2 ultimately, because still a good argument for Arkansas at 1, which is that's who is our number 1 this week. I'll start the conversation with this though, Mark. I have to admit, I am bullish on Texas as a regular season team and one that could make a deep postseason run. I am actually bearish on them as a national title contender. I wish they had like a little more on the mound, and I have, like honestly, literally more people. Like you look at their stat sheet and it's like, these are all the pitchers that have thrown. Like I'm used to, you look at Alabama's stat sheet, and even in conference play, it's like a roll call of your, chemistry 101 lecture class. It's like a huge list, and and then you get to Texas, and it's like, oh, okay, it's it's going to be Riojas and Volantis and Spencer and Grubbs and Harrison, and that's kind of it, and that makes me nervous. But like they just keep winning, and so that's why I say like I'm bullish on them just kind of continuing to do this. But I am a little bearish when it's just like if they get to Omaha, when it's best on best, everybody's got a lot of data on you, a lot of information on you. You're going to have games, especially if you lose a game early, you're going to at some point win back-to-back games. That seems tough for me with the way they're constructed. And I have to imagine on some level, not having Max Blue is going to matter, even if it didn't matter so much this weekend. So I don't want to totally overshadow what they did by talking about like how good they actually are, because we should celebrate another marquee series win for a team that going into the year, I mean, we liked them a lot. I think we had them ranked, 15, 17 or whatever, but like this team has absolutely overachieved any expectation that I had for them. Yeah.
I mean, it started with the Mississippi State series where they go in and sweep on the road. Then you think, okay, well, LSU's coming in and they get, Kate Anderson was so good game 1. Then they roar back and take the series. So you think, okay, they just had this huge win over LSU. They've got Georgia in 2 weeks for a top 5 showdown. They're going to go to Missouri and get bit, because we've seen that happen. Not this year, but we've seen it in the past. And they go and just take care of Missouri. There's no problem. So you think, okay, well, eventually you're going to come back to earth, right? You got another top 5 team at that point coming in. And not only did they win the series, but they got a sweep and won it on a walk-off in 10 innings. I do understand your but, because they are really relying on a small group of pitchers. And then this is a sport where that is very dangerous, because pitchers are, you come up lame. you have a dead arm. You don't have your best stuff every week. So having more volume and not being so reliant on a small group is the preferred path. But right now, I think Texas is just going to roll with what they got because it's being so successful. The obviously, to your point, the concern is what happens in May and June. But right now, they're one of the best teams in the country and just exceeding expectations. And you also wonder, okay, so Jim Schlossnagle is able to get buy-in right away, obviously, to have this sort of success. What's he going to be able to do in year 3 and 4 and 5 once he's been established there? And it really, if you're Texas, you got to be super stoked about your direction of your program.
No doubt about that. That's. I think you and I have said it before. This is probably far from being Jim Schlossnagle's most talented team he's going to have at Texas,
right.
And it could, they're number 2 in the nation and are a good contender to end up in Omaha. So, yeah. On the Georgia side, real quick, Mark,
Yeah.
I just wonder because Texas pitching did a great job with Georgia all weekend. And I just wonder if this is, at the risk of oversimplifying it, I just wonder if this is going to be a extreme home road split team. Yeah. I like the talent offensively. It's not like I just think they're frauds and they just can't hit on the road. But there are talented teams that just have extreme home road splits. And we know that Foley Field is an offensive ballpark. Dish Falk tends to be, to the extent that any park in the SEC is pitcher friendly, it tends to be pitcher friendly. So, right. Yep. So that's a factor for sure. But I just do kind of wonder if it ends up being that, because honestly, I'd have to go back and look at the scores. I forget exactly what the scores were, but generally speaking, Georgia actually pitched okay.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not like the pitching just didn't keep them competitive, but it was actually the offense that didn't do enough. So, I'm not so much out on Georgia in any sort of real way, more so than I just kind of do wonder if this is the reality of Georgia in 2025.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly that's something to watch because they've been so good at home, especially offensively, and then on the road. Although they scored a lot of runs at Florida, but that's a different topic. I do think that if you walk Georgia and had men on base for those home runs, that's where they're going to kill you. If you can make them hit solo shots, then that's obviously that's not breaking any ground here, but that's the formula, because they'll take their walks, they'll take their hit batters and get on errors and do whatever they have to do to get on base in front of that big fly. And I think Texas did a great job of limiting base runners and also just missing bats. I mean, they had a lot of Ks, and I felt like that was what hurt Georgia, just not making enough contact. And then when they did, the ballpark played big. They didn't get the home runs like they typically do. Sets up a really fascinating series next week with Georgia and Arkansas. I mean, that's in Foley Field. They're going to be a lot of trees fed next weekend.
Yeah, I hope they're going to bring in a couple extra boxes of baseballs just in case. I will be there this weekend. Looking forward to being at the new Foley Field for the first time. So excited about that. It is also, by the way, it is also Georgia spring football weekend. So say a prayer for me as I try to navigate Athens on a busy weekend. I am contemplating, and actually at this point, pretty sure I'm actually going to dip on Saturday to go to Georgia Tech and talk to the retiring Danny Hall a little bit, and then come back for Sunday's game. So Friday, Sunday, Athens, Saturday, Atlanta. That seems like the plan, and that'll get me out of the gridlock that is Athens on a spring football Saturday. So let's move on to next we're going to talk LSU Oklahoma. But before we do that, a quick word for our other sponsor of Highway to Hoover, Tecovas Boots. Whether it's the leather in your glove or your tailgating chairs, baseball people know that quality matters. That's why we love Tecovas Boots. Born in Texas, handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps, and comfortable from day one, they're perfect for wherever the college baseball season takes you. From road trips to rivalry games, post-game celebrations, or just everyday wear, Tecovas Boots are made to go the distance. Find your perfect pair at Tecovas. All right, Mark, I don't think we have to be any more delicate about talking about the LSU Oklahoma series than to say that LSU held Oklahoma to 4 unearned runs in 3 games. That's like the full sentence of what happened this weekend, because I mean, really, yes, LSU did have, in particularly the middle game of the series, a nice offensive day.
Stretched it out late. Yeah.
Right. But for the most part, it was just absolutely smothering the Oklahoma lineup the entire weekend, led, of course, by a complete game shutout by Cade Anderson in the opener.
Yeah.
The first complete game of any kind since Paul Skeens in the 2023 regional against Tulane. First complete game shutout for LSU in a 9-inning game since 2018, and the first against an SEC opponent since 2017. That 2017 one by Alex Lang. There's a name from the past. He was very good, yes. So yeah, Mark, what do you got here? I kind of like simply, I just think that's what it was this weekend.
Well, and similarly with how Texas did it, LSU did it with 5 pitchers. I mean, it was, CG on Friday, or I guess it was Thursday in game 1. And then they come with Kason Evans behind Ianson in game 2, and then Shores and Cowan in game 3, and they didn't need anybody else. It was just dominant. And Oklahoma is the kind of team. There's not a lot of. I mean, there's some power, but they're not one of the more powerful teams in the conference. But they really take good at bats. They foul off a lot of pitches, and it's a good 2-strike approach. And for LSU to do that showed me something. I got to see Oklahoma a couple times and really liked what they did spoiling pitches. So for LSU to be able to do that and shut them down, that's loud, man, especially on the road. That's loud. I really and Anderson and Witherspoon on Thursday was absolute theater. That was just 2 aces dueling. That's as good as it gets pitching wise, probably all year. I mean, just to have 2 guys of that stature to come in and just deal, and then Anderson to be able to finish it. I mean, that was interesting because I think all of us thought he would leave after 7, and then he came back out for the 8th and threw, 15, 16 pitches, and then came back out for the 9th and ended up with 135, which that's a number that we don't see a whole lot these days. So it certainly grabs your attention. I do feel like he was cruising. They were not, really. He wasn't laboring to try to finish 135 like we've seen, in years past. But yeah, that number does catch your attention. And so I do think that it'll be interesting to see how this, was this just an outlier, or is this, because there's certainly a lot of attention anytime that 135 number pops up. And I do feel like if it's one game, for me, it's not that big a deal, especially with the context of how he was cruising 1, 2, 3 innings in 7, 8, and 9 versus how we've all seen it in the past, where a guy he's just kind of fighting through it and giving all the bloods and guts to finish it. And that wasn't what this was. This was, he was kind of grooving. But anyway, that was my thoughts. And I do feel like LSU just continues to impress. If they're going to pitch this way, and granted, this is a super high bar, but if they're going to pitch this way, they can certainly win it all. And that's kind of my thoughts, because I feel like that offense is really good, even though Oklahoma did a pretty fair job of keeping them keeping the Sooners in the games, limiting the LSU lineup.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see Oklahoma against Vanderbilt this coming weekend, because LSU is more talented than Vanderbilt on the mound, but Vanderbilt is also talented enough that if this past weekend was perhaps more representative of Oklahoma's lineup than it was LSU's pitching, and I don't think that's the case. Let me be clear, but Vanderbilt's pitching staff will be able, if it is the case that it says more about Oklahoma's lineup, Vanderbilt's pitching staff is good enough to exploit that. So I'm kind of fascinated to see if that ends up being the case. And we knew going into the season that Oklahoma's lineup was probably going to be where they're vulnerable, and they, for a while, kind of, I would say, overachieved expectations, but it has come back a little bit down to earth, and we'll have to learn moving forward if it says more about the quality of the opposing pitching, which I think in LSU's case it was, or if it's something about the lineup that we're going to have to monitor. And I think it's fair to, I think they were heading into the weekend, or maybe it was just heading into the final game of that series. They had the second lowest batting average in the conference, in conference play, second most strikeouts offensively in conference play. So those are not, it's not the company they're looking to keep. So That'll be obviously something to watch moving forward.
Yeah. And one other thing, I mean, LSU going forward, they go to Auburn. And that next Friday night, Cade Anderson, who was the star of this week, against Samuel Dutton, the former LSU pitcher, who was also one of the stars of this week, they'll lock heads, we assume, if the rotations hold on Friday night, and that could be really fun.
Should be a lot of fun. Yeah, one of the themes of this season has been SEC players in revenge games against their former teams. Austin Foley this weekend against Kentucky had some good moments. Cam Kojal went off against Vanderbilt for Arkansas. So interesting. Yeah, we'll see if Sam Dutton can live up to that. Speaking of Kentucky and Ole Miss, honestly, I jokingly said like the tightest series in the history of baseball.
Yeah.
It was 2 extra inning games, one win for each team, and then a middle game in which the game was tied 1-1 in the 9th inning before Campbell Smithwick hit a 2-run homer for Ole Miss to give them a 3-1 lead. And also, you just kind of have to look. I mean, in this league, you're not going to get any sympathy because it's the toughest league in college baseball. But per Matt May, who's the baseball SID for Kentucky, shout out to Matt. He texted me this stat yesterday that Kentucky's last 5 SEC losses this season are by 1, 2, 2, and 1 runs. 5 losses by 7 total runs. And look, again, this is SEC baseball, is what you sign up for, but good golly, that is a tough break. That, typically those 1 and 2 run games tend to be kind of coin flips, but right now it feels like the coin is always, landing Kentucky face down in this case instead of face up.
Yeah, no doubt. And when you have those sorts of just so close, those games were so tight. You go back and you think, oh, if you make this one play in the 3rd inning, it changes everything. Or this one play in the 8th, and both teams are able to do that, right? When they're that close, it makes it. Certainly, it's one of those that when you lose it, you kick yourself. But I want to give a shout out to Ole Miss to be able to go road environment, tough game, able to win a series. I mean, the only series they've lost is to Arkansas, who, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but aren't they pretty good this year? I feel like
I'm hearing rumors they're pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, Ole Miss we wondered how they would do, and yeah, there's still a lot left to prove, but they're off to just an incredible start, in good shape. I mean, if I'm picking right now, I think they're going to host a regional. And for a team that missed the postseason the last couple of years, I mean, what an accomplishment that would be. So, granted, still a lot of time left, but they're on a great path, winning close games and finding ways to not crumble. Because the last couple of years it'd be a tight game and things just wouldn't go their way, and they've been able to flip the script, so to speak, and they're in great shape right now, man.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're sitting at 8-4 in the league, and if we use 16 wins in the SEC as kind of the magic number to at least be in the host discussion, I know 15 can happen, but let's call it 16. That's 8-10 the rest of the way. And you go, we don't need to do it here, but if you go line by line on their schedule, that looks pretty doable. No path is easy, and you're always one injury away from just being totally hosed. That's kind of the way this league works. But right now, based on what they've shown us, I'm with you. Like, I think they can very easily get that done. And they're kind of the team this year for me that, they're kind of like it's a similar thing to what we talked about with Texas, where they're a slightly less wealthy man's Texas, where Texas, it's like, hey, this could be an Omaha team, but I'm less certain of them as a national title contender. Ole Miss is kind of the same way, where it's like, I think this could be a host team, but do I see their pitching holding up enough to get to Omaha? I'm less sure of that.
Yeah.
But they don't need to apologize.
Yeah.
They don't need to apologize to me, like the wins are the wins. They don't ask how, they just ask how many. And so they keep getting it done, to your point. And I think that's a real skill, the mental toughness, just the kind of resiliency, making the most of what you got. It's not the most talented roster in the SEC, not by a long shot, but they're playing well and they're taking care of business. And so, yeah, it's, that's just kind of what you got to do. Yeah. Vanderbilt swept Florida. Not great for Florida. They are essentially done at this point at, what is it, 1-11, Mark? Yeah. Like they're just done. Like the math is so tough at this point. Like, could it plausibly happen? Sure, I guess. What's the difference between that and 3-12? For LSU last year, not much. But given that, I said this on Weekend Waypoints, given what they're dealing with from an injury standpoint and inconsistency standpoint from some of their key guys on the mound, it just feels like they just don't have enough this year to get it done. It feels very different than LSU last year in that regard, where last year we were looking at LSU and going like, this team is really talented. Like, what's the problem here? Mm-hmm. And then they figured it out. This Florida team, I think we know exactly what the problem is, and that's just that they're missing the best player in college baseball that they had last year in Cags. And also they're just really beat up and haven't really ever felt like they had their full team. And sometimes that's when college baseball seasons are short, regular season's about 3 months long. You can have seasons like that where you just don't have enough time to get everything sorted you need to get sorted. And it feels like that's kind of where Florida's at.
Yeah, they're just not able to make the big play at the big time. Too many walks on the mound, too many runners left in scoring position. They're getting base runners. They're just not driving them in. And it's a pattern at this point, and it's got to be mental, partially at this point, because when it repeats and repeats and repeats, it becomes a thing. And you've got to do something to get that gorilla off your back. And right now it is dug in. And because of that, I mean, they had every opportunity to win, certainly the second game against Vanderbilt, and had opportunities had they thrown strikes and got hits with runners on to make a change in the other games. It's just they're just not in a good place mentally, and as a result, their season is certainly teetering on being over. Now, the other side of that is Missouri comes in. Not only would you have a chance potentially to get some wins, but maybe you can kind of get the mojo back. But right now, I haven't seen anything that leads me to believe that that's imminent. The thing I would look at is, Kevin O'Sullivan is still a really freaking good coach, and if he can figure this thing out, certainly if anybody can, he can. But time is ticking on them. On the Vanderbilt side, I loved the play in game 2 to bring Fennell in to close the game. He was, they were TBA, but he was going to be the starter if he wasn't used on Saturday. And to come in, he's such a hard look. If you can go ahead and win the series, do it. And that's what Vanderbilt was able to do. And hey, we'll figure out on Sunday. And they did, because honestly, Florida didn't have a whole lot of pitching left either. So it was fairly even. So you didn't need that advantage with Fennell on Sunday. And I do feel like this was great. Vanderbilt, their RPI soared up into the top 10 with those 3 road victories. They're in they certainly improved their stock from where we had them heading into the weekend to coming out. Even though you beat a 1-11, a team now 1-11 in the SEC, it was still impressive the way that they went about it, especially getting those. They got a lot of the clutch hits that we mentioned that Florida didn't, and they didn't walk a small continent. So I believe is a great formula. When you face a team that's struggling, you're not helping them out and you're getting clutch hits, and that's what Vanderbilt did.
I also mentioned Vanderbilt having the type of pitching as we move forward to stifle Oklahoma's offense and any number of other offenses in the league. And our friend Aria Gerson from the Tennessean tweeted some numbers earlier today, kind of to put numbers against that. So I'm quoting now from Aria. Vanderbilt pitching now leads the SEC in runs allowed per 9 innings at 3.68. They overtook Tennessee after this weekend. Among conference mates, they are also 5th in OPS allowed, 3rd in K to walk percentage, 3rd in K percentage, 4th in WHIP, 5th in FIP, and 3rd in XFIP. And those last 2 numbers are more advanced numbers, but all you really need to know about them is that it tries to normalize the ERA and strip out some of the other things that go into ERA so you can get a better idea of how good a pitcher is independent of factors around him. Mm-hmm. So regardless, all that means that, maybe they're not the top pitching staff in the league, as we so often got used to Vanderbilt being, if you go back 5-7 years. but they are really doggone good and pitching well and are going to give a lot of teams fits. I still, we all have questions about the offense. That's just going to be a thing, but they are certainly capable of pitching the team to a deep run in the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really impressive to go down to Gainesville against a team that really needed it in Florida, and to be able to not only get the series but get the sweep.
Moving on to Mississippi State against South Carolina, a series that Mississippi State just had to have. It's still a deep hole to dig out of. I would still probably bet against Mississippi State ultimately being able to claw back into being a postseason team, but by winning the series against South Carolina at home, their pulse is a little bit stronger coming out of the weekend than it was going into it. And really that was just kind of the bare minimum ask, and they can move forward trying to figure out, if they can continue to win games, but they just had to have it.
Yeah. Going into Sunday, it was a rubber game. Of course, South Carolina wins the first game. Mississippi State takes the second. It was really there for either side to come in and, all right, let's do this. Well, if you're Mississippi State, you're at home. This was one of those before the season started, you had chalked up it as a series win. You got to have it. And they hand the ball to Carson Ligon, who got absolutely lit up at LSU. And he comes back and is just nails. He gives up a hit to the first batter, and that's the only one he gives up as long as he's in the game. And then Stone Simmons follows, and he doesn't give up a hit until the last batter he faced at the end of the game and ended up in and out. So they throw a 2-hit shutout in a game they absolutely had to have. And if you're Mississippi State, you're thinking, all right, now these are two guys that I can really depend on now, because here in this big moment with all of the, I guess, the noise, we'll call it, around the early season swoon, they stepped up in a huge moment. And then I do feel like the schedule does set up for them to claw back in this thing and maybe make it interesting. So they're playing for something towards the end of the year. Maybe you're not hosting, but you certainly have a chance to climb into a regional. And I feel like that Mississippi State's a type of program, they need something positive right now. And maybe this is a step towards that. And if they can get that and get those fans back in there and make it just a crazy environment, maybe when Ole Miss comes in May and you've got this, and that series is always going to matter, but maybe it matters to both those teams as they try to improve their postseason resumes. That could be, nobody does great events like that Mississippi State fan base. I mean, in Duty Noble gets rocking. It's at the top of the sport, and there's an opportunity for all that to still be in play, where we kind of wondered, with the way things started.
On the South Carolina side of things, we've mentioned it before that their biggest thing right now, for better or worse, is they just don't have enough guys. Yeah. Like, they just don't have the talent really to go toe to toe and throw haymakers with most other teams in the league. And I think one thing that's illustrative of that is that they've got this situation on Sundays. If you assume McCoy and Jarvis Evans are kind of locked in those two spots, they have this deal on Sundays where they've started Matthew Becker. This past weekend, they started Brandon Stone. And it feels like they're caught in this situation where whenever they start, let's just say Matthew Becker, for example, he'll throw a couple good innings and then it'll just get sideways on him. And then you bring in Brandon Stone and he's great. But then if you flip-flop that dynamic, right, you flip-flop that dynamic, it's the same thing. And that's what you got yesterday, where Brandon Stone's great first time through the order, gets lit up the second time through the order. You bring in Matthew Becker, and he's awesome the rest of the way. And so I think that's kind of illustrative of what I'm talking about, where it's just they've got a couple of guys who are pretty good pitchers who have a role to play, and neither of them are guys who can go through a lineup 2 or 3 times. And that's just kind of where South Carolina's at, And that's a tough place to be. I talked about it. I think it was on Weekend Waypoints, but maybe it was with you, Mark. But I really do think it was Weekend Waypoints, where I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But given the whole South Carolina's in, hard to see them digging out of it. And this offseason is going to be really important for them. They've got a lot of stuff to address to kind of get back into being a team that is not just a postseason team, but also a team that can make some deep postseason runs. That they're going to have to, I don't want to say totally overhaul the roster, because I do like some of their young players. KJ Scobie, Bo Hollins, guys like that. But they are going to need to really reinforce the roster in the offseason, given what where they're at now.
And just with their coaching staff dynamics, how it kind of all came together there during the summer. You didn't have a ton of time to hit the portal and build relationships with recruits. Year 2 was always going to be the year that you can really judge what this staff's going to do. And I feel like this year you're laying foundation. And they do play hard. They make you earn with what you get, which I feel like that's going to help them. They're going to win some games maybe that on paper they're underdogs because they're just going to outfight you. But that only takes you so far in this league where talent reigns, and that's where you're going to see it next year. If this program's going to get back to where it expects to be, there's that talent influx has got to be there.
Last series to talk about is Arkansas and Missouri, and I really don't necessarily want to beat up on Missouri any more than we already have and everyone else has. But man, Mark, I just don't know. You've been covering this league a lot longer than I have, and that's not an old joke. That's just the reality. And I don't know that I can recall a bottoming out like this.
Yeah, it's bad. So if you want to look for look at who they played. The worst team they played is ranked 6th in the nation right now in conference play. 1, 2, 3, and 6. There's a lot of teams that are going to get thumped. It's just how bad it is, right? Especially the big scores. That's what we're seeing. That's really troubling. And granted, Jaden Pimental out for the year. Ian Losey didn't throw this weekend. I'm not sure what his long-term status is, but they didn't have a ton of pitching depth anyway, and you lose 2 of your best guys like that, and you're putting people who you didn't expect to be throwing on Friday, and then behind them, and it's just it can accumulate, and that's what's happening now. And the offense is not good enough to keep track. So it's. Yeah, I am curious to see what they do. They'll go to Florida, who's not one of the top 6 teams in the country this year, at least not in this week's poll. So I feel like we'll at least find out, is Missouri, can they be competitive here? Because Florida certainly should allow that if Missouri can pitch a little better, which it's a big if based on these last 4 weeks. And then with Arkansas, man, they're just not letting up. It's really easy when you win. Was it 21-5 or whatever it was, or 3 football score in the first game, to just kind of go through the motions for the rest of the series and just, hey, we're Arkansas, we're going to win by showing up. They didn't. They kept the hammer down, and they didn't even bat in the 7th inning all weekend. I mean, it's one of those where they scored all these runs in 6 innings every game. So going to be super fascinating to see what they do going to Foley Field. I'm jealous of that. Joe, you'll have the full coverage for us. And I'm curious because, Arkansas's pitching has kind of been overshadowed now by this great offense. Well, they're going to get an incredible test pitching to Georgia in Foley. You better keep the ball down. So that'll be a really nice matchup. We're all going to focus on offense versus offense, but I think both of those pitching staffs who've kind of had some ups and downs through the year, taking on these offenses, I think that to me is just as fascinating.
Yeah, it's such a good point because it might be in terms of raw talent, the 2 most talented pitching staffs in the conference, and by extension the country, perhaps. And neither has been like the fully realized version of itself yet. So that is an interesting point. Yeah, because you're right that I think the offense is going to steal a lot of the headlines here, but it is an opportunity also for one of these pitching staffs to kind of show that they're rounding into form in a way that they maybe hadn't before. So I'm totally with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mark, that feels like a show. Got another big weekend coming up this weekend. Like Mark mentioned, and I've said, I'll be in Athens. Looking forward to that. We'll continue. That will also be the halfway point of SEC play this coming weekend, believe it or not. So
Yeah.
we have reached we've got the cruise control on right now on the highway to Hoover, right? We're fully up to speed. We're in the part of the rural part of our country where the speed limits are 80 or 85, so we've got that thing at 90 and set it on cruise control. We'll be there before you know it, for better or worse. It's going to be a lot of fun, but also there also is a little bit of melancholy of just thinking about how quickly this all blows past us. So
the only stops we'll make now is we'll stop by Academy and kind of,
that's right,
work through and get a few items to prepare us for the stretch run. But other than that, I mean, we're rolling.
That's right. We've got our Tecovas boots.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, because we're going to have some rainy days, so we're going to need some boots to deal with some of the mud and muck there. Also, yes, we're going to need some supplies, some rations from Academy Sports and Outdoors, but we are well set up thanks to our sponsors. So thank you again to our sponsors at Academy and Tecovas Boots. Thank you to Mark, as always, for joining me, and thank you, the listener, for listening. We'll talk to y'all.